Welcome to another Founder Wisdom Pod. We have Eric Solano with us today. He's co-founder at Jump Search and the Executive Alliance. This podcast is presented to you by podper.com. If you want to start a podcast, it's also presented to you by Qual Your Mind. If you want to optimize your mind, it helps with focus, memory, and drive as a busy entrepreneur. Eric, welcome to the pod. Tell me a bit more about yourself, Jump Search, and what you're up to nowadays.
Yeah, Charles, thanks for having me here. I appreciate you reaching out to me and wanting to have me on your show and have an interesting conversation here. I run Jump Search Recruiting, and Jump Search is a boutique management consulting and recruiting firm. We work primarily with venture backed startups and growth companies. And more recently, we've been evolving to integrate more AI and helping with sort of the combination of AI with virtual assistants, which is offshore specialized talent that can help solopreneurs and entrepreneurs. So, yeah, that's kind of my background, at least for the past 10 years, and interested in exploring it more deeply with you.
How's been this year financially and what's been working, what's been not working?
Yeah, it's been tough the past year and a half. A lot of changes, as I think a lot of folks can understand. Tech has been tough. Past year and a half, there's been a lot of reduction in force across companies. There's an abundance of amazingly great talent out there. If you are starting a company, if you are hiring, you have your pick of talent out there for the most part. And so, what that means for recruiting is that recruiting has the landscape's really shifted. Internal recruiters, there's been a lot of reduction in internal recruiting force, and so a lot of recruiters are doing the job of one, two, three, four, five recruiters now. So they're just really inundated. Also, there's a lot of great talent, like I mentioned. So there's a lot of folks that are applying to the limited job opportunities right now, and so it's kind of creating this sort of perfect storm where it's creating a lot of problems for employers, but it's also creating a lot of problems for the great talent out there. And so morale is low. The companies that are hiring are just getting inundated with, one job posting can have as many as several hundred applicants within a few days, and it's creating a lot of challenges. I think this paradigm of this antiquated paradigm of resume and job description, it's ripe for disruption, I believe. And it's quite antiquated and it's causing a lot of problems. And you see a lot of different services, a lot of AI services springing up that I think are just trying to address the symptoms of the problem. And so it's interesting times right now. It'll be really interesting to see how this evolves.
And mentally, how are you dealing with setbacks? Is it pure grit? Is it working smarter? Is it A/B testing more? Like, what do you
Yeah,
fall back on in these hard times?
yeah, that's a good question. That's a good question. So, um, to get to your previous question, recruiting's been really tough for us as a business. So that's why we've been evolving into sort of adjacent pivots. It's a series of ups and downs. I think a lot of job seekers right now can. It's given me a way to kind of empathize with the job seekers out there because although I'm not looking for a job, I am looking to reinvent our business model in a way that is meeting the evolving market need, right? And so like a job seeker, similarly, they have skills and experience that they can bring to the market. And many of them are struggling to figure out how to, position themselves, how to be relevant, how to market themselves. And so as far as how I weather those ups and downs personally, let me think. Grit is one thing, but it's just it's a word. But how does that manifest itself concretely? For me, I have to celebrate the little wins. That's what keeps me going, right? And it's this mindset of gratitude that helps me celebrate those wins. And those little wins can be, oh my gosh, it could be something as little as getting a response back from from somebody that you're reaching out to. It could be for whatever reason, right? It could be a personal reason, it could be a business reason. It could be coming up with a good, what you think is a good idea, and then getting some validation for that idea, even if it's a little validation. On the personal side, it could just be, the quality time that I spend with my kids and my wife, and just pausing, finding the moment and just the presence of mind to pause and look around and find the gratitude in what we have around us, right? Because that's what helps me weather the ups and downs. Well, it helps me weather the downs, but it helps me really, really truly appreciate the ups, right? And so, knowing that the downs are not going to last forever, but also the ups aren't going to last forever either. And everything in our life, whether personal or professional, is transient, right? And so I think the important thing is for me anyway, it's to try to appreciate what I have. I know it sounds cliche, but try to appreciate what I have and to take a breath and to just to feel the life that is within us and around us. Because too often I get caught in this trap myself. Too often I'm thinking about, oh, what do I need to do? What about tomorrow? What about next week? What about this? What about that? But if I can't find that moment in the present, then it's all for naught. And so that's one thing that helps me weather the ups and downs. The other thing is just having a good support system, whether that's your friends, your family, your spouse, even your children can be a strong sense of support. And that's something that I'm learning, right? As a parent, you think that, oh, I'm the parent, I have to support my kids. But in many ways, I find a lot of support from my kids. And it's just the emotional connection with my kids that I find so fulfilling. And I and don't get me wrong, I don't do this enough. But I gave you an example earlier, Charles, about this weekend, and I tried to spend that time with them, and I found that it was actually very fulfilling, rejuvenating for me. And so they've been very supportive of me, where it's sort of shifting the paradigm a little bit because usually I think that, oh, I'm the parent, I have to support my kids. But I'm just discovering now, just as recently as this weekend, that they can play a hugely supportive role in me, in supporting me and sort of my emotional fulfillment. And so yeah, not to go on and on, but really just gratitude and having a good support system and finding support where you can, and then celebrating the wins, and yeah, I would sort of summarize that as sort of my top three.
Yeah, gratitude. I don't think it is yeah, like cliche. I forgot about gratitude recently, I had to remind myself to be grateful of this life, I think we all do as like super ambitious people. We always try to check for the next summit instead of enjoying the view. I
Yeah.
often talk about that with my psychotherapist, smelling the roses. I think it's quite important here. Um, Now, your business, indeed, like at HR, recruiting, outstaffing, this is all quite hard to convince a startup to hire you to help them scale their teams. How do you actually convince them? Do you do some cold outreach? Is it fully LinkedIn? What is your secret magic recipe to get more clients in your niche?
Yeah, I'll talk about this prior to 2 years ago. Prior to 2 years ago, it was relatively easy. You just do good work, your name gets passed around, and you're off to the next client. I didn't, and this is sort of maybe something that I've learned over the past 10 years is I didn't spend a lot of time doing business development. I didn't spend a lot of time marketing, putting a strong sort of formalized message out there. Um, I just did good recruiting, and and I relied on word of mouth, and that got us by. Not just got us by, but it did really well for us. Granted, we didn't grow in terms of like headcount and even by revenue, but by revenue per person on our team, we were doing really well. And so that was prior to 2 years ago. Now, fast forward to the past 2 years, we've had to really hustle in terms of formulating sort of a personal and professional brand, really immersed myself in learning how to leverage LinkedIn, how to create content, and I'm not a master at that yet. I'm still learning, but learning to create content, learning to create content such that you can speak intelligently about a given niche or area and position, learning to position ourselves as, thought leaders or authorities in recruiting and talent acquisition, and more recently in AI. And I think that's going to be an interesting sort of confluence of HR, talent acquisition, recruiting, and AI. And so yeah, that's, I mean, I wouldn't say there's any magic to it. I think it's just creating a system, and we're still in the process of creating that system, while we're learning to pivot and sort of massaging our messaging and our niche. I think niches are something that are really important. You can't serve everyone, so you have to sort of carve it down, and that's an art into itself. But yeah, that's sort of what work in progress right now.
And tell me about the AI part of it. For example, yeah, I just had right before you, I had this client interested in buying my cold email services. They're in Stafford, right?
Hmm.
So I told them about Clay, which some campaigns that I did for golance.com. I told them about the podcast angle to have a bunch of their ICPs on podcasts, and then convert them into clients. Do you use any of these outreach tactics, lead gen tactics, either the podcasting one as a lead gen funnel or AI outreach via Clay to get new clients?
Yeah, so that's a good question. So the whole podcast thing, I have a podcast, a Jump Search podcast, where we've got 13 or 14 podcasts published, and so that's all new to us. Like we just started doing this back in December-ish, and so in terms of sort of the marketing and sales motion that we're putting into place and we've been putting into place, it includes a podcast. We use Go High Level or High Level, and we have we're using our personal brands. And when I say we, my co-founder, um, also my business partner and my wife, Michelle, we are investing time in terms of our LinkedIn profiles and presence, and we're using that to create a funnel that we run into landing pages and trying to convert them into your typical landing page and convert them into either booking a meeting or drip sequencing them, right? And so that's something that I mean, as of recently, as of last week, we're implementing different sequences and landing pages. And so the podcast, for me, it's, I'm looking for ways that I can sort of establish myself as an authority in recruiting and in AI, um, so that when people think about hiring, that we come to mind, right? And so uh, we also the podcast for me is really a way to meet interesting people like you, and it gives me a chance to learn from folks. And so that was my first and foremost sort of intent with starting the podcast. As a recruiter, I've interviewed like thousands of people over the years, and a lot of times I end up having like really interesting conversations with them. And a lot of times I'll walk away thinking, man, I wish I could have recorded that, or if nothing else, just for me. But if we recorded it and shared it with the people, there'd be so many people that would stand to learn and gain from that conversation. And so I was like, why don't I just do a podcast? And initially, it was kind of nerve-wracking for me. I'm not one that really enjoys or is not naturally inclined to just be in front of the camera. I'm learning how to get comfortable with it, but usually I'm the one behind the camera. I've always been a photographer, and I enjoy being behind the camera. And so, anyway, yeah, we're setting up sales motions and marketing motions, and a lot of things that we're learning right now. So
And the podcast, like tell me how much episodes so far are you thinking of getting sponsors? Have you got any business insights, connections out of it? Like has it
Yeah,
scratch your own itch?
yeah. So it's given me the opportunity to connect with folks in a more formal way and just riffing off ideas. And so there's people that I've had conversations with that you know, I wouldn't be interviewing them for a job because they're not looking for jobs, but it gives me an excuse to have a conversation, and then now I have a relationship with them and I can have follow-on conversations with them. And so we again, like we're only like 13 or 14 podcasts in. It was a little bit of lull this past spring, but we're going to be investing more time into it. I have a VA, a virtual assistant that just started with me, and so she's going to be helping me sort of build out my podcast calendar because I have my hand in other things, and so that's been sort of something that's been slowing down. So I need to now that I have help, we're going to be spinning it up again. Um, but yeah, it, the ability to create a podcast and sort of here's one thing I do want to share. The other reason why I wanted to create a podcast was to create content of me talking. And again, I'm not like yeah, I'm not entirely comfortable in front of the camera, but I'm getting better at it. But the reason why I wanted to create more recordings of me talking is because I wanted to give my children a way to get to know me in a different way. And I know it sounds like so far off, and that was my idea. Maybe I've wanted to start a podcast for years, and that was my idea for it. But I just never got around to it because business was too good and I was too busy. But now with this lull over the past year or two, it's been a sort of a blessing in disguise. It's given me an opportunity to be like, oh, well, now I can start this podcast, right? And so, and then now with AI over the past year and a half, 2 years, the content that you create in a podcast can be like your essence, right? The more content you create, your essence can be almost immortalized through AI, through these knowledge bases that can be created with your content. And and Charles, you've done this. You kind of turned me on to Delphi, and I was playing with that this past weekend, and I was like, this is super interesting. And so I'm going to be publishing my own what they call it a clone. It's like an agent, right? That basically can speak on your behalf and answer questions. It could do tier one customer support. It can even do interviews, right? And so I'm playing with that. And now that I'm creating more and more content, I know that my essence or my clone will be around 30 or 40 years from now when I'm gone. And my kids can interact with me and remember me in a way that it far exceeds like a written journal or anything like that. And so anyway, I'm really excited about this, if you can't tell. And, I appreciate you sort of sharing that Delphi.ai lead with me. I'm going to start sharing that with folks, as I create my own, as I refine my own clone or agent. And I think there's a lot of possibilities there. So it's really exciting.
Yeah, fully agree with that. Gonna get my dad to create his Delphi. I think he's tech savvy enough to do it.
Yeah.
You've been on LinkedIn for 20 years now. You've got that fancy badge of yours, top voice. Any tips on content on LinkedIn? Are you using any AIs to actually post relevant and valuable content there?
No, no, not really. Most of the content, virtually all the content I've written has been written by me. I do use ChatGPT every now and then for ideas, and sometimes to get either to get an idea or something started, or to clean it up on the back end. But as far as like writing it, and I wouldn't recommend that either, because unless you have it super, super dialed, um, the there's LinkedIn is getting a little bit more saturated with AI generated content, and they're even introducing like a flag, I think, to indicate if the content you're creating is AI generated or used AI to generate the content in any way. And so I think what people what people might be missing with AI is that it could do a lot of great things, but when it starts to pass when you start using it to create content that maybe is not coming from you necessarily, people can kind of sense that, and there's a little bit of a feeling of a lack of authenticity with the content, and I think people will start to get maybe a little bit numb to some of the content out there. And I don't know if that's just something that's inevitable, or maybe the AI just gets so good at creating good content, which I'm not sure if that's going to be the case, that people really remain engaged with it. So I don't know. I mean, as far as me, I use it like again for creating ideas, for brainstorming, to be a good partner for brainstorming. But for actually writing like the entirety of the content, not so much. And maybe there's a trick to it. Like maybe there's a trick to repurposing old content and having it really speak in your voice in a way that's really compelling and really reflects your tone and your voice. I haven't cracked that nut yet. But and there are a lot of LinkedIn and like a lot of other tools are trying to figure out ways to integrate AI as part of sort of one-off features within the existing experience. Pretty common. But with respect to, I mean, there's a lot of tools out there too that are coming up to make life easier. So it's interesting to see. One thing that I like is, and I know that it's largely AI generated, is in Facebook they do a lot of book reviews, and there's no way that somebody's doing this themselves. They're reviewing the book and they're summarizing the book in a way that is it's pretty interesting. It allows me to kind of consume a book very quickly, and obviously it's only like 1 inch deep, but it's pretty handy because I can see the book. A lot of books that I've already read, I could see the summary of it, and it kind of helps me re-jog my memory or rethink about certain aspects of it. But anyway, that's one thing that I enjoy.
Very cool. Well, Eric, thanks for the value you've added today. Where can people find out about you?
Yeah, connect with me on LinkedIn /IN/ Eric Solano, and follow me. And if you're interested in talking about AI or recruiting, talent acquisition, reach out to me, and I'd love to connect.